Hello everyone, welcome to 12am Coding, and today we are going to discuss about a new topic in our Spring Boot series, which is at the rate configuration. Okay, so at the rate configuration in our Spring Boot we use a lot, right? But when to use it, we will be learning this about today. Okay, so I have written some notes here. Okay, before coming to these notes, I just want to tell couple of things to you. Okay, which is I want to introduce one new annotation which is at the rate bean. Okay, okay, and right now we'll be seeing how this at the rate bean is different from at the rate component. Okay, so before understanding this particular at the rate configuration, we need to understand what is at the rate bean and what is at the rate component. So in our last tutorial, we already read about this at the rate component. Okay, so today we will be discussing about this at the rate bean and the difference between these two things, and then we will be reading about at the rate configuration. Okay, so if we talk about Spring Boot, right? So it is having IOC container, right? As you all might aware about. In our last tutorials also we have discussed it in detail. We are having IOC container. Okay, and we have seen that Spring Boot will scan the classes which is having at the rate component annotation, and whichever class is having at the rate component annotation, Spring Boot will put that particular object into IOC container. And when you want to use it, you can use it through AutoWire, right? Whenever you want to use it, you can use through AutoWire. Like let's say fruit class is there, so here we are having fruit class, and if you want to use it, then AutoWire it and you can use fruit class. Okay, so this is the thing we discussed in our last tutorials. Now the thing is, we can also create the object or bean with the at the rate bean annotation also, and with at the rate component also. But what is the difference? Let me show you. So let's go to the code first, and first of all let me create one class for giving you the example. So we are having one class fruit. Again, I'm taking fruit only. Then I'll create one method here which will be returning a string, and then tasty. Okay, I'm creating this tasty, and then it will return fruit is tasty. Okay, so this it will return. Now what we will be doing, we'll be doing we'll be creating a controller actually. Okay, and we'll be testing this. Okay, so let me create one container here. Let's say fruit controller. Okay, so in this particular controller I am marking it as rest controller, and then I'll be creating one get mapping with the default path, and I'll be creating public, then a string, then fruit, let's say, and then it will return something. What something it will return? Let's say I want to auto-wire my fruit class here and then create a fruit. Now I want to return it fruit dot tasty. Okay, so this is a simple thing I have created. Now the thing is, to let this fruit class object available to this particular get mapping and this class, we need to mark it as at the rate component, so that whenever Spring Boot will start or initialize, it will automatically inject the object, and from AutoWired you are using it and you can print it. So let me run it. Okay, so it's running now. It ran, and let me access it on 8090 port I am running. So if you see fruit is tasty, so what it is doing, it is just calling this and printing this. Now one more annotation comes into place at the rate bean. So let me show you how you can use it. So for now, let me comment this particular at the rate component, and I'll be creating one more class. Let's say fruit config. Okay, and what I will be doing, I'll be marking as at the rate configuration. Okay, in this configuration I'll be doing one thing which is public, and this will return you the fruit, and let name it as fruit only. Okay, and what this will return to you, it will return a new fruit. Okay, and what I will do, I'll mark this as at the rate bean. So for now just bear with me, I'll be explaining each and everything why it is so. So what I have done, I have just commented this component, so it is not a component, and I am using this fruit class again. But what I have done differently is I have created a configuration class in which I have created a bean. So now let me run this particular class and see how it goes. Okay, so it ran. Now also if I try to access this particular URL, then my fruit is tasty getting printed. So what's happening behind the scene is, let me tell you. So this is our fruit config. Okay, in this configuration I am creating a bean, and if you observe, I am just creating a bean with the name new fruit. Okay, like I am not auto wiring, or like I am not component scanning it directly. I am just returning this new fruit. So behind the scene, what is happening, that let's say currently we are having one class which is fruit. Okay, okay, which is not marked, and we are having some function here. Now what you have done, you are writing at the rate bean, okay, fruit, and then fruit, the method name, and you are returning new fruit. Okay, so this is what we are doing. So when this is annotated with at the rate bean, then what it will do, whatever this particular function is returning, it is an object, it need to go into IOC container. So that is the little difference between these, but the uses we need to use it at different time. So first thing is, like at the rate component we need to use on class actually. So whenever any class you want to put it the object into your IOC container, okay, so you need to annotate that class with component. But for example, we are having some third party library. Let's say in your Spring Boot application you are using some jar, let's say MySQL jar or MySQL dependency. In that particular class, in that particular dependency, let's say some classes we are having which is not marked as at the rate component. So when your Spring Boot project will run, right, then at that time it will not create their bean in into IOC, right? So what we can do, if we are having some third party classes, then we can use this at the rate bean annotation, okay, and we can create one configuration actually, okay, and in that configuration we can put at the rate bean, and then we can, with the help of one function actually, we can return the new object of that particular class. Okay, and then what it will do, it will inject that bean into your IOC container so that you can use it in the same way you are using your at the rate component object. So let me repeat, with at the rate component, the classes in your project, okay, the bean of those classes will be created into IOC container. But in case of at the rate bean, the classes which are outside your project, the dependency you have added, if those are not already marked as at the rate component, then you can use them. Okay, so I think it is making little bit sense, but we will be understanding it more. Okay, so let me give you one more example of this particular thing. Okay, so we are having like whenever we develop the database connections, right, we will be using data source. Okay, this data source is a class, and some configurations are there. So what we will do, we want to set some configuration. Let's say this particular data source is there, okay, and then you will create a method, and this data source, it is coming from some other library, let's say some other dependency. Now in this data source, let's say you want to set something that for example, like you'll be creating data source ds equals to new data source, and let's say you want to set something, data source object dot set something, and you want to set that, and then ds dot set, like it is your configuration you are setting, and then you want to return this particular ds. So all these settings whatever you have enabled, if you mark it as at the rate bean, then it will go and sit into your IOC container, and when you want to use it, you can auto wire the data source, okay, and you can use it. So in simple term, we are again creating an object, but for the third party classes, okay, it's not in our project, so we are creating the objects for those. So whenever we want to do that particular thing, we need to use at the rate bean annotation for that. Okay, so I think it is making sense now. Now one more interesting thing comes is your at the rate configuration. So you guys can say, like, whenever we are having any, like, if you see in this particular project, then I have created it as at the rate configuration. Okay, and fruit config, and then I'm creating a bean. I need to do that. If I can, like, if I want to do, I can do component also. Let me provide at the rate component. So what it will do, we just want to scan the classes, right? So our Spring Boot project will scan this fruit config, and it will inject the bean also, this particular bean. Let me show you it will work actually. Okay, let's see how it goes. So if I use it right now also it is working, but there is a difference. Like, at the rate component, whenever we want to scan any class in your Spring Boot, you can do that. So it will be performing all those operations in the same way at the rate configuration is doing. But there is a slight difference between at the rate configuration and at the rate component. So the difference is this particular thing. Okay, CGLIB, which is code generation library. So let me read this out so that we can better understand this. So the purpose of this CGLIB is Spring uses CGLIB to create runtime subclasses of the classes so it can intercept method calls. So the object creation and everything, it is maintained by this particular library. Like, in IOC we are inversion of control we are doing, right? So those objects are getting created single time only, as I told you. Like, if let's say you are having 1,000 classes, in 1,000 classes, if you need to use one class, and if you will be using new that particular class, right, then you will be creating thousands of objects. Rather than we are providing the annotations like at the rate configuration or at the rate component, it will create a singleton object into your IOC, right? So that is a beauty of this CGLIB. Now let's see at the rate configuration, Spring enhance the classes with a CGLIB proxy. Okay, what does it means? Calls to a bean method from another inside the same config class are routed through the proxy, returning the manage singleton instead of creating a new instance. This is full mode. Okay, and if you use at the rate component, then with a bean method, no CGLIB enhancement for bean interpretation. Okay, direct method call, just execute the method body and create a new object light mode. So what happens, let's say I'll show you this particular class you are using at the rate component. Okay, and it is a fruit config. So let me just put one code here. I just created for you guys example. So what I'm doing here, okay, first of all I'm creating a bean of fruit through this particular mechanism. Okay, let's say at the rate component I'll put over here. So what will happen, the fruit bean will be registered into your IOC container, right? Now I have created one more method with the at the rate bean in which I'm calling this fruit method two times. Okay, and then I'm seeing, like, if those two objects, object A and object B fruit, are same or not. Okay, I'll tell you why. Let me run this and show you first. And we will be seeing behind the scene what is happening. So if you see in our console, then what is it is printing, right? So first see, like whenever this component is there, so this class got scanned, and when this class got scanned, it is creating a fruit bean. So for the first time, this fruit bean got created whenever this bean ran. Now second thing is, when we are calling this fruit A equals to fruit and fruit B equals to fruit, again it is printing this creating fruit bean. So again, like one more bean it will create for this, another bean it will create for this, and then we are printing system out dot print ln, in which if A is equals to B. So if you see, components are same, like are these two objects are same? So it is not actually, it is printing false equals to. And then if you see, this is our object A, com.example spring demo fruit, then this is the id 5633 ed82. Then for the B object it is fruit 7671. So those both IDs are different. So let me tell you behind the scene what has happened. Okay, so we are having one IOC container. Okay, this is our IOC container. When you are calling fruit for the first time with at the rate bean, okay, one object got created into this particular IOC container. Then in another method, let's say fruit2, there is a method in which you are again using with the method call. Okay, this method call you are doing, you are not using AutoWare actually, you are doing a method call. So what it will do, it will create one more bean here. Then if you do fruit equals to fruit, again it will create a new bean, right? So what it will do, it will use the new bean every time when you use at the rate component. Okay, that's why we have written here that component bean method no CGLIB enhancement for bean interpretation. Direct method call, just execute the method body and create a new object. Okay, so it is not using the beauty of Spring Boot, in which if we created the object already, then we don't need write these objects again and again. We can use the same object here. Okay, and now let me do one thing. Rather than at the rate component, let me put at the rate configuration. So if we run this particular code, then let's see what happens. So if you see, we are only printing creating fruit bean once. We are not printing it again. Okay. So it is same. It's true actually. So those both two object, if we are calling fruit, like if we are calling this method, again we are calling this method, what it is doing, it is creating a object A with 77BB48D5, and second object is also 48D5. So those both objects are same. So with at the rate configuration, what happened? Okay, we are having this IOC container here. 1 minute. Okay, so we are having this IOC container here. Okay, in this IOC container, when you are using fruit at the rate bean, and it is returning you a new fruit. Okay, okay, and here you are having fruit. Now what it will do, it will create one bean into your IOC. Okay, then you are using it into different method. Okay, fruit 2, you are using it here. So fruit equals to, you are calling this fruit method. Okay, and then this is f1, then let's say f2 equals to, okay, now what is happening, this particular bean is coming here, this particular bean is coming here when your class is annotated with at the rate configuration. Okay, so this is the beauty of at the rate configuration, and it is using this CGLIB proxy for doing all those things. Okay, so this is the difference between at the rate configuration and at the rate component. So let me repeat, if you are having a class, if you want to create a bean of it using the Spring Boot, then you can use it at the rate component, so that the bean will be created into your IOC. If you are having multiple beans which is coming from third party libraries, and those are not marked as at the rate component, and for that Spring will not be responsible for creating the object directly. So for that, those things you can use at the rate configuration, and you can define multiple beans with their configuration. So Spring will register those into IOC, and you can use them directly with at the rate bean. And at the rate bean is provided for the method, not for the class. Okay, and in the same way, as we discussed about component, you can provide the name of the beans also. And let's say this fruit bean having fruit one, let's say I'm having, and for example I create one more bean which is fruit 2 here, and let's say I'll give this name as fruit 2. This is also returning a same fruit. So what it will do, it will create a two objects now. In my controller, I can again use, you remember, at the rate qualifier. Okay, and in this qualifier I can provide my fruit 2. Okay, so here if I print creating a fruit 2 bean. Okay, let's see how it goes. So this should call the fruit 2 actually. Okay, so creating fruit 2 bean. So as we have defined two beans here with the fruit 1 and fruit 2, so fruit 2 created, fruit created, and this particular is same, like I am not returning a fruit because it might get confused. Okay, so if I run it, it should work now, because I am just qualifying it. I am just providing the qualifier so that it will call fruit to now. So yes guys, that's it for this particular tutorial. And I think this at the rate configuration, at the rate bean and at the rate component is making much more sense right now. So if you guys are having any question, then you can mention in the comment section so that we can learn it better. So thank you and see you in the next tutorial.